I think it's welcoming the stranger, it's just being kind and welcoming to the people around you that, you know, don't look like you, that don't look like they came to America. So for me, like I said, that relationship with the Burmese family made me kinder in the grocery store. It made me kinder in the parking lot in traffic, in Atlanta traffic. Just made me more understanding of people around me may not be coming from the same foundation that I came from. And so I think it starts there with just being kinder to the people around you that probably had a different start in life than you did.
Hello and welcome to the Simple Charity Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Grosso. This Christmas season, I have a series of 3 interviews for you about loving refugees. This year, we've seen a lot of headlines about global conflicts, and at the same time, the United States has nearly entirely cut its refugee resettlement program. This felt like an appropriate Christmas topic as we celebrate the story of Jesus' birth, which of course immediately preceded his family fleeing violent persecution and living as refugees in Egypt. In the first episode of this series, we learned about life in refugee camps around the world, and this one we'll learn about America's refugee resettlement program, and in the final one, I'll share a conversation on the current politics of refugee care. Today on the show, I interview Sarah Burke, the Community Engagement Manager for Inspiritus, a nonprofit that resettles refugees in cities across the Southeast. Our conversation provides an overview of how refugees are vetted and resettled in America, why Clarkston, Georgia is the most diverse square mile in the country, and how refugee resettlement has been impacted by the current Trump administration. I had this conversation with Sarah back in August, and I accidentally recorded the audio on my AirPods instead of my microphone, so apologies for the mediocre audio quality on my end. Join me anyways for a conversation about America's refugee resettlement program. This is your podcast, so as always, please send me your thoughts, your questions, and suggestions at brian@simplecharity.org. And if the show is helpful for you, please click a 5-star rating in your podcast app, click like on YouTube, and also hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this on, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. This really helps the algorithm get the show out into the world. I'm so grateful for that support. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, my name is Melissa, and I serve as a Simple Charity philanthropic advisor to individuals, couples, families, foundations, and family offices in the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area of North Carolina, but also to clients around the country. If you're curious about your own generosity journey and would like help thinking through a philanthropic strategy with intentionality to discern where God is calling you to love people, to find excellent nonprofits to partner with, or to understand the impact of your current grant making, I would love to connect and share more about Simple Charity's philanthropic advising offerings. You can connect with me at melissahall@simplecharity.org. That's melissahall@simplecharity.org. And you can learn more about us at simplecharity.org. That's simplecharity.org.
Well, Sarah, hello. Welcome to the Simple Charity Podcast.
Hi, I'm glad to be here today.
Sarah, what are you grateful for today?
I am grateful for the cooler weather. I think that it's probably fake fall and summer will be back around before actual fall, but I'm fully taking advantage of being outside, walking, riding my bike, and just soaking up these cooler temperatures.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it might be a few weeks before we release this episode, but to those who are listening from the Atlanta area, it is the first week of August. We just got some rain, some clouds, and I agree. Last week was so hot. I literally I felt like it was like hard to focus on my work and life.
Yes,
Like I
yeah.
was
You had to
actually
be
exhausted.
in water or in air conditioning. Those were the only options.
Yes, yes. And Sarah, you also are in the Atlanta area. Where are you now in Atlanta?
Yeah, so I'm in West Midtown,
West
right
Midtown.
outside, just yeah,
Cool.
just on the other side of Georgia Tech.
And are you, is this like the home office right now, or do y'all go into the office?
I'm at home. So I work from
Okay,
home
okay,
primarily. I go into the office once a month for we do like an all staff team meeting in person, and then as needed
nice.
other than that. So our offices our office, we used to have 2 offices and had to reduce it this year. In we used to have an office in Decatur and an office in Clarkston, Georgia. So we now just have our office in Clarkston, and that's a space actually where clients can walk to it. It's accessible by public transportation or by walking.
Hmm.
So really in the heart of the immigrant community there in Clarkston.
Yeah. So you work for Inspiritus, which I'm pretty sure does a handful of different things, but one of those is refugee resettlement. Can you give a quick overview of Inspiritus? And then I want to circle back to Clarkson, just in case people don't know
Sure.
um, what makes Clarkson special. But before that, tell us about Inspiritus.
So Inspiritus' mission is to guide people from surviving to thriving. So we come alongside that
Mm,
walk. We actually do a few different things. We have disaster response and recovery. We work with adults with disabilities, having host homes to allow them some autonomous living.
mm,
And we do foster care for medically fragile kids. And then our largest staffed program is our refugee and immigrant services. So we work all over the Southeast in disaster and foster care and adults with disabilities. But and specifically what we'll be talking about today is the Refugee and Immigrant Services program, which I work in. And in that program, we have offices in Atlanta, what we call Atlanta, but specifically Clarkston, um, Nashville, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, and Savannah, Georgia.
how long have you been with the organization?
I've been there for 6 years.
Okay, great. And what was your path to Inspiritus?
So, it started living overseas in India. So I actually spent 3 years in India teaching English and working with a missions organization there. And I came back from India to the States and was having a really hard time with that reverse culture shock coming back
Mm,
to the US and
yeah.
just re-entering that Western culture that is very driven by schedules, agenda, things like that. I was used to a more relational culture where we just spent time with people and relationships were the thing that mattered the most, not time.
Mm,
So I started volunteering for World Relief actually. And that was kind of that's where my journey began in refugee resettlement by being a volunteer. And I was paired with a family from Myanmar. I picked them up from the airport and I visited with their family and kind of helped them adjust to culture in America. And honestly, it was a very mutual relationship because
mm,
I was teaching them things about American culture, but they were giving me a space to come and just be. Just come sit with their family, have tea, I could just pop by, I didn't have to schedule it. I didn't have to, there was no arranging. I could come, just stay for as long as, it worked for both of our families. We would have meals, we would cook together, we would go to the park. And
wow,
through
you got really close to this family from
yeah, so
Myanmar.
through that, I'm helping them learn English. I'm helping their
Yeah.
kids with homework, teaching them these are things that I now do, talk to my volunteers about because I'm a volunteer coordinator, is helping our families learn what's junk mail. Like, that's such an
Yeah.
American
Yeah.
concept that you get something in the mail and then you just really need to throw it away, but not everything because something might be a bill. Like,
Yeah.
and so just navigating that, things like,
It might be junk mail disguised as a bill.
exactly. Yeah, that's really hard.
Yeah.
St. Patrick's Day, that you're supposed to wear green to school. All these little kids are getting pinched, and they don't know.
That's so
Um,
sad.
yeah. So there's a lot of little things like that. There are things that we refrigerate in America that aren't refrigerated in other cultures. The concept of refrigerate after opening, like, I never thought about that, but if you go to the grocery store and you take something off of a shelf, and then after you open it, you put it in
Yeah.
a cold storage, not back on the shelf. Like, you would think that if you bought it
Yeah, it's
off of
like,
the shelf,
why?
you
Yeah,
put
why do
it
you have
on the
to
shelf.
yes, right.
We intuitively know what things, or we can read the English on the label. And
Right.
so there are times where you have to be like, "Oh, actually, this has to go in the refrigerator."
Mm,
And yeah, so there's just a lot of little things like that. Basically, that's what I was doing. And then World Relief was hiring a volunteer coordinator, and I applied, and I was like, "I've been a volunteer. I know what things were
mm,
helpful for me, what things I wish I had been told or learned or trained." And so I worked at World Relief for 6 years until their office closed under the first Trump administration, and then I moved over to Inspiritus doing the exact same things, exact same
Mhm,
role,
mhm.
exact and Inspiritus, is, one of 4 agencies in the Atlanta area doing the same work, and so, yeah.
And Spiritus has historic ties to the Lutheran Church, is that
Yes, they were
correct? Or
formerly
okay,
Lutheran Services of Georgia, so when I came, they
yes.
were actually right in the middle of their transition, their name and branding.
Okay, got it. Is that just a rebrand, or are there actually like less ties now to the Lutheran Church?
I don't believe that it does not appear that there are less ties, it was
Yeah,
more expanding the ties. So it had been
right.
pretty limited to the Lutheran Church. We've
Now more
maintained those
ecumenical.
relationships and
Yeah,
also yeah. And
yeah.
so, to get really nerdy about the refugee resettlement program, there are
Please.
9 resettlement agencies nationwide, umbrella that partner with the US government, and so our office is an affiliate of, and so at
Yeah.
World Relief, like, that World Relief is one of the 9, and so
Mm,
they have World Relief offices, but the way it was with Inspiritus is it was Lutheran Services, LIRS, Lutheran Immigration Refugee Services, and we were an affiliate of that. They actually
okay.
changed their name and rebranded to Global Refuge, and they dropped the Lutheran. And so it was there are still Lutheran Services offices in some states, but a lot of the offices followed that path.
Okay. Okay. I see. So yeah, so these are the 9, you know, uh, 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 I think I don't want to say mostly, but maybe mostly faith-based or faith,
They are mostly, yeah,
they're mostly faith-based,
because it's Catholic
nonprofit,
charities,
5, yeah, Catholic charities.
there's
Is
a
there a
Jewish
Jewish one? Yes.
mhm,
Okay, okay, yep. I've seen this list before, it's somewhere in my brain, but, so these are these 9 501(c)(3) nonprofits, so part of this like the civil sector, that have these contracts with the federal government, where basically the federal government has been saying, "Hey, we want to, have this program so that when we have this legal process to take in refugees, people fleeing persecution, violence, some sort of, natural disaster, whatever would be the cause. We want to be able to welcome them and integrate them into an American life. But basically, the federal government said, instead of us building an agency to do that, um, there's these faith-based institutions already doing things like that.
yep,
So let's just contract out that work. And because they'll probably do it better than us, which is honestly a pretty amazing, like it's a pretty amazing partnership, especially when you think about, like a world relief, for example. This is like this like evangelical, like um, you know, very yeah, I think people are actually pretty oriented at world relief around like wanting to share their faith, like wanting to like, tell people about Jesus and all this stuff. And like and doing this in the name of Jesus, serving in the name of Jesus. And it's very, it's the contract did not involve, I just want to like paint this picture here. The
yeah,
contract did not involve, and correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, toning down like the Christian identity. It's not like, hey, here's this money, so go welcome refugees. Maybe it's like, you have to use this money for these set of services, not to like proselytize, but they're not saying you can't proselytize, and they're not saying you have to take Jesus off the website or anything like that. It's
right.
basically just this partnership, public-private partnership, where the federal government was partnering with mostly Christian organizations. So welcome refugees. Is that an accurate
So the
kind
only
of?
clarification there is in
Yeah.
the work, there is they're not allowed to proselytize as a part of the work because they
Hmm.
don't want people who have not had a choice really to receive these services to be, like, trapped or caught, right?
For
So
sure.
volunteers, for World Relief are allowed to, but the staff themselves within the services are limited in that one specific area. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I come actually into this with, in Simple Charity, we applied for funding. There was like federal funding from, uh, to have a university pay for a college student we hired, their like part-time salary while they were a student, like a work study. But if it was federal work study, they said, actually, you can't use this money to be doing anything explicitly religious.
Yes.
But they're not saying the organization can't be religious. They literally, I mean, it was kind of like
The
nitpicky. It was
work
like
itself, yeah.
the work itself.
Yeah.
Yes, they're like if they're writing a Christian blog post, that's a no. If
Yeah.
they are doing
Writing
your
a blog
bookkeeping,
post for a
that's fine.
Christian organization. That's
Yes,
fine.
that's fine. Exactly, exactly. Um, okay, um, so I want to talk about kind of the big picture here, but before we get into like what's happening now, like kind of the work of Inspiritus, like how Christians can like think about this stuff. Let's talk about Clarkston. So tell me a little about Clarkston. What makes Clarkston a special place?
Um, That's a great next question because I had already wanted to delve deeper into the origin of the refugee program, and it does start with Clarkston, actually. So it starts with President Carter in 1980. He's the one who created the Refugee Act of 1980, and being a president from Georgia, he, when creating this, looked around and said, "Where should we start?" And Clarkston was a bedroom community. It had a boom of development in the 70s of apartment complexes with the assumption that people were going to live in Clarkston and take public transportation into the city. It's on
Mm.
our public transportation, MARTA. It's on the MARTA line. So there's a train directly into the heart of Atlanta. So there was the assumption that people would move into Clarkston, live there, and work in the city. It formerly had been a farming community. Its original name was Goatsville. It was a large goat farming community, and so these developers came in, developed it into this, apartment hub in this bedroom community, and it didn't go as planned. There was not a mass, influx of people moving to Clarkston. So you now had these apartments available at a low rent because they, were just wanting to get people in them with access to public transportation. And it was the ideal place to start resettling refugees. So when President Carter, created the Refugee Act, he said, let's start with putting immigrants here in this community, resettling them here into Georgia, into Clarkston. They'll be able to go to work. They'll have public transportation, and there's affordable living there. So they'll have access to jobs and low income rent. Um, and Clarkston wasn't quite ready for an influx of immigrants from all over, all different nationalities originally. That is definitely something that has happened over time, over the past 40 years. But when I'm doing a tour of Clarkston, when I'm taking people, it's 1 square mile. I think that's important to note. Clarkston proper is 1 square mile. So it's a very small, highly, dense place. There's a local grocery store. It originally was an IGA in Clarkston, and they were really suffering to stay afloat because they were just carrying our traditional Southern American groceries. And you now have, international people living around them that didn't recognize those, ingredients or were not shopping there. So the manager of that grocery store actually started hiring, at that time, was a lot of Vietnamese refugees, started hiring them and asking them to do the ordering for the grocery store, and just said, will you please order what is going to get bought? Like, I need to stay in business. That eventually became known as Thrift Town. That was the grocery store that was there for a long time. And over the years, it just continues to evolve. So as the predominant culture in Clarkston changes, so does the groceries at Thrift Town. And it's a place where people can walk there, and buy their groceries. And so once, that happened, then there were also a lot of opportunity and spaces for entrepreneurs, for restaurants, for, people who had owned their own businesses back home, who had been, you know, had been chefs and owned restaurants, to start cooking and owning their own business. There's a lot of ethnic food. It was considered by CNN the most diverse square mile At one point, there's a lot of
The
documentaries
the
online
most
in the US.
diverse group in the U.S.
Yes, yes. This was several years ago, but there's a lot of documentaries online you can find. Was it Queer Eye? They filmed an episode in
Okay.
Clarkston. So there's a lot you can find online about Clarkston. It's a beautiful, diverse, any given time you're going to see people walking. There's every faith institution that you can imagine. The local community center and library is a real hub for the community, teaching English classes there and doing community festivals and events. We have a World Refugee Day that we hold in Clarkston every year, festival. So it's a really unique. It's unique, and as Inspiritus has offices in Nashville and Birmingham and Savannah, we're always faced with just how good we have it in Clarkston, and that
Mm.
that doesn't exist in some of these other communities. We're swimming upstream a little bit more so in the other communities.
Yeah, that's super. Honestly, it sounds in some ways similar to when I lived in Durham for about a decade, Durham, North Carolina, and there's parts of Durham that have also resettled a decent number of refugees, but it's a very internationally oriented kind of place in the research triangle. And so it sounds like maybe some similar experiences there. Um, so folks who come to the States as refugees, what is that process like for them? Can you just give us a quick summary of, who are refugees and how do they enter the US?
Yeah, so refugee is an immigrant status, as there are so many others. You can come, you know, on a student visa, as a special immigrant visa. There's, asylee, asylee seeker. There's all these different options, and refugee is one of those options. So to become a refugee, it is also the most strenuously vetted status. You have to have fled your country because of persecution or fear of persecution.
Mm.
You have to have
Do,
crossed
do you
an
do you know
international border.
do you know if there's like a formal definition of like what
Yeah.
persecution means?
Yes, yes. So, um, sort of. So you have to have crossed an international border, and you have to prove that you've been persecuted. First of all, there's 5 reasons for persecution.
Okay, okay.
So race, religion, ethnicity, political affiliation, or social. It's more like gender-based violence, um, or like homosexuality, or something like that. May be illegal in your country, but is protected by human rights. So I will say, so there is a definition for what type of persecution, and you have to prove that. It is a little bit subjective as to whether that was threats on your life, actual physical torture. There may be people in your community or family who have been killed or imprisoned or, beaten because of these things. And so you can tie back to a fear of persecution and show you have to prove that through a series of interviews with someone, you have to prove that you've been persecuted. So that's the first step. And you have to do so having fled your country. You can't, if you stay within your country, or territory, you're considered an internally displaced person. So you have to have crossed an international border and apply for refugee status there. The reason that this matters, and I think that this is important for this audience, is that you don't have anyone coming across our southern border applying for refugee status in the US. They have to have applied in another country and be resettled into the US. It's called third country resettlement. So when we're working with refugees specifically, they are coming at the invitation of the US government. Like, we've actually identified them through the UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, as someone who's qualified as a refugee, who's gained refugee status. They go through additional screenings. It takes about 18 months. They do health checks, security checks, background checks. They're interviewing each person in the family to make sure that their stories align, that there's not any discrepancies, that they don't have any ties with any kind of militant groups or extremists,
Terrorism or yeah.
anything like that, and before they gain refugee status. Then, let's say, takes about 12 to 18 months, you qualify as a refugee. There's varying numbers of countries that do third country resettlement. I'm not exactly sure what it is currently. Most recently, it was around, I think, 18 countries. And so you could go to one of those. You don't know that you're coming to America. You know
Mm.
that your goal is
You're
safety,
fleeing.
protection.
Yes.
That's your goal,
Yeah.
is to just get somewhere that will protect you and allow you to live free and safe. And so you may end up in one of these other countries that has chosen to accept you. So the US is one of those countries that evaluates the refugees who've gained refugee status around the world. Now, it is called the presidential determination. It's one of the things that the president has authority over, solely apart from Congress, gets to decide how many refugees is the ceiling for that next fiscal year, and what countries or areas or territories we're going to focus on. So when people are like, where are people coming from? We have to look at where did the president decide he wanted us to focus relief on. And the reason you do that is because then the other countries are going to focus on, that are doing third country resettlement, are going to focus on other areas, right? So together we're working to provide relief, to the refugees around the world. And so we're then interviewing the people who we in the territories that we've said are eligible to come to the US. The US
Hmm.
actually does their own vetting. So the UNHCR has done it, but we have the philosophy, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And so they do it again. They do the background checks, the interviews, the biometric screening, all of that. And then there's some additional screening that was actually put in place a few years ago, and mostly like technology has allowed for some enhanced screening.
Mm.
And so before they're allowed to come to the US. And so then it's like, okay, congratulations, you're now approved to come to the US. And so then what they do, they is the PRM, Population Refugee and Migration, and ORR, which is the Office of Refugee Resettlement. These are both federal programs,
Agencies. Okay.
agencies. They assign to Global Refuge, to World Relief, to Christian World Service, a certain number of people that they're going to allot to each agent of those 9 agencies. So Global Refuge gets that, and then they, which is who we're under, and then they, dole it out to the different affiliate offices in around the US. So that's kind of how they get from overseas to DC and then down to us. And then we usually, this is all talking about pre 2025.
Yeah, let's talk about the pre 2025. Yeah. How was this functioning before
This is
this year?
historically. Then in Spiritus, Atlanta, in Spiritus Nashville, and Spiritus Birmingham, Spiritus Savannah get specific cases, and we review them. We review the interview notes, we review their health screening, we review their family, dynamics, how old, how, is there any medical issues, all of that. And we say, yes, we can accept this family into this office, that we'll be able to provide the resources needed, whether that be medical resources or, sometimes we're like, oh, there's not anyone from that country in Birmingham. That's probably not going to be a great fit for them. But we have a community of that ethnicity in Nashville. Actually, we're going to accept them in Nashville instead. So we have a little bit of say so in that.
Mm.
Or we can say, no, we just don't have the capacity for what that family is going to need at this time. And then they'll get sent to a different affiliate office. So in that way, the family doesn't even know what state they're going to. They now have found out they're going to the US, but they don't know where. And so I think that's important to note, because people are like, oh, why didn't they learn English if they're coming to the US? Well, they didn't. They may need to learn German and French
Yeah.
and, all of these other languages of countries that they might go to. We sometimes will find that if they're in a refugee camp overseas and that camp has a school that's run by an NGO in another country, that the family or the kids especially may know this what feels like random language, like how
Mm.
Dutch, like in Africa, and it'd be because there was a school there, and so they were teaching them. So that we kind of see that sometimes. Anyway, so then we find out about 2 weeks in advance when they're coming, and that's when we really start. Um,
Whoa, 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 whoa. You find out 2 weeks in advance?
yes. Yes.
why is the system so, uh, what? That's crazy. You're gonna call like, "Hey, we're gonna have, maybe X number of people show
Yeah,
up
so
in
we've got
Clarkston in
we
2
get
weeks."
we've gotten the, like,
How do you
pre-screening where we've been
plan?
able to say
Oh,
yes
okay.
or no. So we know in theory in the next few
Yeah.
months, so as far as booking their flights and stuff,
Right.
no, we
Right.
literally will find
Right.
out you're getting I mean, at one point it was like, "You're getting 7 families this week," and the next week there's only 2, like, we had no control over that.
Right.
And then
So you
then
are managing like staff and everything to
yeah, so we're
do
setting up
like the
apartments for them,
volunteers. Yeah.
volunteers, we're having people meet
Mm.
them at the airport, we're walking through their first, like, 24 hours of, "Hi, welcome to America," like
Yeah. Wow.
and these there are things that are required. We're required to provide a first meal for them, we're
Yeah.
required, just there's a certain well, and I think it's
Because
fascinating the
it's
things that are required in an
yeah.
apartment, is a bed for every person, a fork, plate, spoon, knife for every person, but, uh hangers are actually something that is required, but not like a bookshelf, a TV. Every family wants a TV. That's not on the required list. We only have it if we have it donated,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are just certain things that it's like we have to have a plug-in alarm clock because they may or may not have a phone, and so they need to be able to have some, orientation with time. So a lamp in every room that doesn't have an overhead light, and a lot of apartments won't have, light where you go in and turn on, so we have to put a
Yeah.
lamp in each. So these are all like required items.
So this is the federal government saying, we're giving you this money. Here's what we need.
You just spend it on
Every, yes, every family needs a lamp
these
in every
things. Yeah,
room.
exactly, exactly, but not a TV, which is fine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah.
They need light, not TV. It's just the families are like, "We're used to sleeping on the floor together, like, why do we have so many beds off the floor? Like, can
Yeah.
we get rid of these?"
Yeah. Well, something I learned recently in another podcast interview was that, refugees in refugee camps often live there for decades, like actually decades. And so, so interviewed someone who builds housing in refugee camps because, he just is like, well, he spent some time in refugee camps and realized, gosh, like kids will spend
Their
their
whole life.
entire childhood in
Yeah,
this refugee camp. This will be like their home. Like this will be their entire life. And the shelters are often really subpar, like it's like tents and stuff. And he was like, this is your whole childhood. Like, let's build you a little house,
yeah, yeah,
but anyway, so just thinking this through, you know, a, um, like a typical person, they're fleeing violence to the point where they feel unsafe in their country,
mhm,
not just in their town or in their whatever, but they unsafe in their country. They leave. Like this is like if I was like I'm not safe in America, I'm going to Canada,
yeah,
and then you go to a different country, cross the border, potentially live in a refugee camp for a decade,
right,
at least the whatever 2 to 4 years it takes
right.
to go through the
The average
process
stay is
of
18 years, so that's
the
the
average
average,
stay in a
average.
refugee camp.
Mhm, yeah,
Man, the
because here's
average
the thing,
that's insane.
it is
The
insane.
average stay is
Average,
18 years. So
yes,
you're saying there's people who are living in refugee camps for 18 years, and then they get through all this process and they say, I will go anywhere else in the
yes.
world. One of these 18 countries or something.
So the
And then
number one goal for the UNHCR and for people, and I think this is really important when refugees come, they're not seeking the American dream, and a lot of times they're not even necessarily grateful. Like, we want them to just be like, "Ah," and they're still grieving, and then, if anything, there's a new grief of the finalization that they will probably never go home. And that's what they're actually feeling, because the number one goal is that whatever caused them to flee would be resolved and they could go home. That's, like, the ideal scenario.
so at the
Second
end of here,
best
that hasn't happened.
right. Second best would be that they could assimilate into the country that they are in, and that there would be a path to, working and ideally a path to citizenship, but at least a legal, be allowed to be in their country free and legally, and to work and receive medical care and their kids to go to school because that country is going to be more similar to their home country. Third country resettlement is the last resort. It is not the ideal. It is we've got to do something and we want to help and it's better than what they have. And at this point, 18, 20 years into it, they're not going to get to go home. And
Hmm.
so, we need to start looking at what is the next best option at that point.
When people come here as refugees, do they generally have, um, a college degree or no college degree? Like, what kind of work
So it
did they do
depends on where
previously?
they're coming from and where
Yeah.
we're resettling from. Um, we do get a lot of people who has servants and drivers in their home countries. They had gone to university, they acquired engineering degrees, doctors, lawyers, a lot.
Real quick, just to culturally contextualize the servants comment, that's not as weird as it is.
Good point. Good point.
Sorry, I just want to
Good
make sure
point.
just in case
I'm
people.
glad you said that. But people who are driving them around,
Yes.
who are cleaning their house, so
Yeah.
it can feel like an identity crisis to come to the US and then be put on a factory line and
Yeah.
work, or to be put in the hospitality industry where you're cleaning hotel rooms, but you, in your home country, paid people to do that. So
So
it can.
what would they be doing to, in their home country? Like, can you think of an example of a refugee who was really successful in their home country, and what
Yeah,
and
I mean, I can think of
what would be
several
their job?
families who then,
Yeah.
the best hope we can give them is saying that your children, like you will never achieve the status that you had in most likely in your lifetime that you had in your home country. That is a
Right.
loss. That is a loss that you have experienced along with your home, along with, your community, your family. You've physically lost people to death. And so you're probably never going to achieve that. We do have a doctor in Clarkston who's on one of the documentaries who came to the US, had been, in a clinic. He had been a doctor, meaning I'm not sure what, like, doctorate status. I think,
Sure.
not like a surgeon.
Yeah.
He came and he washed dishes at Emory and went to school, and he is now, he's gotten his doctorate, and it is
Wow.
possible. He worked really hard, but most people are not going to do that. They're going to be able to provide their kids an education that they had in their home country and allow them, a path, um, that they would not have had, that they have had to flee. So yes, it is a stereotype to assume that everyone's coming as a refugee came from thatch huts in rural countries that didn't have electricity or running water. We have a lot of, you know, we have a lot of refugees who are coming from affluent countries, westernized countries, who and even refugees that speak English. We have refugees that were translators for our US military, in Iraq and Iran, Afghanistan, who worked for the UNHCR, who worked, for the US government in those countries. And then their lives were at threat because of that.
So let's get into the story now of 2025. So, um, let's say someone has some sort of, you know, good life at home, you know, some sort of high status job, some people who drive them around and, you know, clean their house,
Yeah,
and comfortable middle class, upper middle class even, and something happens, a
yeah,
war breaks out
yeah,
in their home country. They fear for their life, they fear for their family's life. Let's say they have a baby,
yeah,
given a hypothetical here, but
yeah,
I'm trying to humanize
yeah,
the story. So let's say they have, a baby, and they run away flee their country, go into a neighboring country, and then live in a refugee camp, let's say for 18 years.
Mhm.
At that point, their baby that's their entire life. Maybe they've raised a family in this camp and they want something else. They want to go somewhere else. They still can't go back home. They
Mhm.
still don't feel safe at home. And they, go through this arduous process with the HCR, is that
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
UNHCR and then
United
after that
Nations
with,
High Commission for Refugees, yeah.
yep, after that with the American government, and they do their fingerprints like 10 times and send them off to this various, and
Yeah.
then, and then they come over to America. They end up in Clarkston within Spiritus
Mhm.
in 2025.
Yeah.
And what happened then?
That's so sad. I mean, I think it's sadder for the families that had flights and had tickets and everything to the US, and then those were canceled, and now they're, it's remaining that secondary country and, in limbo. But let's say the families that came and let's say
Real quick, can you explain that real quick?
yeah,
What
so
situation?
the refugee, program was suspended on January 20th, January 21st, 2025. Uh, that all of our borders were closed at that time. We were not accepting any new refugees. So there were people who had flights, who had, within that 2-week window that we knew were coming, that were now not allowed to come. This did happen. This happened previously. We actually, one of our staff members, Augustine, his family was on the last flight to make it in to the U.S. Um, during Trump's first administration when he put a ban on several countries. And I think they got delayed in like a layover, and they weren't sure if they were gonna be able to come to the US. It was very tumultuous. So that has happened for a lot of families that they're now, are we continuing to go to the US? Are we eligible to go to another country at this point? Can we change? A lot of the vetting process is restricted
Country specific.
and within a certain time frame.
Oh, I see.
So there's an expiration date to it. So
Mhm.
you have to renew that. You have to do it over again, if it expires. So there is also like, a ticking time, clock on that. I want to say bomb, but the families who came who came in January, who came in December, because we typically work with families for 3 to 6 months. In January, we were told that the program was suspended. There was the funding freeze. That was also something that happened, in late January, early February. We started asking, are we allowed to do our job legally, even if we're not receiving federal funding from it? Like, if we're receiving philanthropic funds or private donations, are we legally allowed to do the work? Or so are you just
Interesting.
not funding us? Or are you
Yeah,
saying we're
yeah,
also not allowed to do the work?
yeah.
So it's very complicated to figure out. And then I started recruiting volunteers because I was like, well, if we can't do the work, volunteers can do the work, right? Like there are
Right,
people
right,
on the
right.
ground who would just want to take people to
Just
the
do
doctor's
stuff.
office, just
Yeah,
get their
yes.
kids enrolled in school. Like this is the work we're talking about. Help
Yeah,
them find a job. Refugees come, they're eligible to work on day one. They come with a
yeah,
EAD, with an employment authorization
right.
document. And so we're like, these people need to be working so that they're not
But
relying on.
that's because they've been so deeply vetted. This is
Yes,
the most vetted immigration pathway into this country, to
yes.
just to reiterate that.
And it allows for them to be self-sufficient in the
Yeah,
quickest amount of time. They're not
right.
relying on a lot of federal resources. There are some, yes, but not, the they're upwardly mobile. The reason Clarkston changes its culture, kind of demographic and makeup is because people are moving out of there. They're buying
Mm,
homes. They're
mm,
moving into the suburbs. They're moving into, wherever their communities are. And so, yeah, so we were just like, we need to help these families find jobs. Like, they need to be working. Like,
Yeah.
we're not getting paid to help them. They're not getting any money,
Yeah.
you know? So that was, but then also we're having mass layoffs. We've laid off 75% of our team in like 6 weeks.
My
So
gosh.
you don't have a case manager. That person who met you at the airport and came on the first couple of days you were here, that phone doesn't it just rings. Nobody's answering it. And so we're at Inspiritus grieving the loss of our colleagues to layoffs while also having to figure out how to not leave these clients here with nothing, like with no resources or help. So I'm telling you, the community, the faith community really stepped up. We had
Mm,
churches that were saying, give us a family. We'll handle this. Like, we'll
wow.
come alongside a whole family. We'll take their kids to enroll them in school. We're going to, we're going to find other little community resource rent assistant programs, house them. We're going to help people find jobs. We've got cars. We've got, like, it was amazing.
These
Honestly,
are churches around Clarkston
around, yeah, I mean, in Atlanta, Clarkston,
in
but
Atlanta.
also, like, the
Yeah. Yeah.
Savannah community at Birmingham,
Yeah.
like, so not just in Clarkston. This was, I mean,
Yeah.
the faith community as a whole,
Hmm.
and my s I forgot this in the beginning. My specific job is I'm the community engagement coordinator. So I liaison between the, service work, people who are doing direct services, case management, and the community. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to find volunteers, interns, things like that to come alongside our clients. So
Mm,
I was the busiest I had ever been. I was speaking at a church every single Sunday.
yeah.
Um, and all over, anywhere and everywhere, people wanted to know what's happening and what can we do. And I'm telling you, talk about like encouragement in the midst of such a dark time was to
Mm,
say, this is what it's supposed to be like. This is what's supposed to happen. It was fun, people donating money, people donating resources, people don't like it just whatever they had, they wanted to give. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And hard at the at the same time. So, yeah, that's one of the things that's how we kind of weathered that storm, and we did not get any new arrivals, because the program was suspended. Um, there were no new arrivals, so the focus was just on the arrivals that had come in, like, December and January and
mhm,
helping them
mhm.
really move towards self-sufficiency. And then I do think it's important to note, um the refugee program was unsuspended. It was reopened in, June, I believe, with the first Afrikaners who were coming to the US. And
Only
so
Afrikaners
only
or
Afrikaners. And I for education purposes, I will not insert my opinion here or in Spiritus's, but for education purposes, Afrikaners have not gone through the refugee
the refugee process
process.
because they're still in South Africa.
Correct.
So
And they
at most
are
they'd be an
coming
internally displaced person.
to the US with a refugee status.
Hmm.
They are being given, and this is, highly discussed as to, like, it doesn't make sense, it's not accurate, and it goes against everything I've been saying for 12 years about
Mhm,
refugees. We haven't resettled any in Clarkston. We've had a couple of families in Birmingham, maybe one in Savannah. It's a very
mhm.
low number of people, but we are providing the same services, wraparound services that we would with any other refugee family,
Yep.
and they're the only arrivals that have been admitted up until
Mhm.
this point.
So
And
there's
look,
still in 2025, as we're recording this, beginning of August, there still are no refugees from there zero, 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 other than Afrikaners?
okay,
Because
okay,
even
okay,
in the
hold on, hold
first
on, hold on. There were like two Congolese families that we have resettled that were refugees, but it was a different like loophole. It was like So
So there was a backstory for it,
yeah,
kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
something about their process that they were already in process, and I'm not sure how they were allowed, but we have received 2 Congolese families in the land in the Clarkson office. But yeah, but as far as, like, how we were typically getting, you know, 2 weeks in advance and
Yeah.
clients to approve and
Yeah.
all of that, none of that's happening.
Yeah. Um, do you think refugees, and we ask you, this is kind of a yes or no question, or like it's about black or white, but I'm also going to ask for, I
Okay.
guess, an explanation. Do you think refugees in our process, you know, before
Mhm.
2025, do you think refugees make our country stronger or make our country weaker, and why?
100% stronger, and there are a lot of statistics to show that. Like, the what they give back to our economy, the entrepreneur, business owners, um, just from an economical standpoint,
Yeah. Yeah.
our
Yeah.
country is better having refugees specifically. Um, I could go into the benefits, I think, of other immigrant statuses, but, um and
Well,
also,
yeah,
I
go ahead.
think that we are a better people when we are allowed the opportunity for diversity and understanding different views of the world, different cultures. I cannot imagine my life if I'd had to return to the US and Western culture without an opportunity to heal and re-assimilate in the safety of a warm culture country culture, warm country culture, a
Yeah.
family from another culture.
Yeah.
Like that, I don't think I would be here. I mean, I know I would. I wouldn't be here, but I also would not be who I
You
am
needed
in
you
the
needed
grocery store, in the
the
parking lot.
Myanmar family you needed in
Yeah,
that season.
I needed that. I needed that.
Yeah.
I needed that. But I think we are a more compassionate, understanding, warm, friendly society when we have those influences. We're not a warm culture country. We're not.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when we
Yeah.
have the other cultures to teach us about even about like how some cultures pass down history through storytelling.
Mm,
That um think about our music, right? Like if we
mm.
the lack of culture and influence on our culture would just have we would be a lot less, I think. I can't imagine Atlanta without
So
diversity.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, that's
I can't imagine my typical week without the opportunity to eat ethnic food cooked by actual people from that country.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I would.
See, there's cultural beauty here, and the other thing, interesting argument I feel like I hear you making is that we live in a time of social cohesion kind of coming apart. Like we have uh, Americans are lonely and having a hard time connecting with each other, and a lot of cultures around the world are just higher in this kind of cultural trait of communalism, and so they like have this sense of like hospitality and tea and an unhurried spirit, and that there so I kind of hear you saying there's like a gift there to
Yeah,
receive from
yeah,
especially kind of like Eastern cultures that have a higher and Latin America. I mean, honestly, yeah, like it's kind of a uniquely not totally uniquely, but an American European problem,
yeah.
that we're so um lonely.
All right.
I mean, it's a global thing. It's but there's
And then I
so
would
I think
love
it's
to
an interesting
provide some
argument.
statistics to you that we're part of a coalition of refugee service agencies in Georgia, and they compile statistics every year about the economic impact of immigrants.
Sure. Yeah.
So I can do that on the on the backside. I don't have access, like I'd have to search for it, but
Oh, okay.
yes, yes, we are a better country, culture, and
Yeah.
I'm a better person because of
Yeah.
immigrants.
Send me those statistics and we'll put them in the show notes for the podcast. I feel like I've been a little bit riled up. I tried not to be political on this podcast, and I truly don't. But I to me it feels like uh, uh, like whatever you think about for example, like President Biden's policy on the southern border and whatever processes were there to allow people to enter the country illegally, for example. Whatever you think about that is an entirely separate issue
Yes.
than the 100% legal process by which people around the world fleeing violence were entering the United States until the start of this year. So I just feel like I just want to bifurcate those really clearly.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, in my own political views, like policy views, like I think there is some like ambiguity, moral ambiguity, and hard questions around that first one, and around how to think about illegal immigration. I think illegal immigration is, I think it's good to have a process. Like we got to think deeply about that. This is not that.
Yeah.
Like this is not, this is completely legal. This is people who are fleeing. They've already crossed the border, probably waited in a refugee camp for 18 years, and they
Mhm.
still just want to go somewhere else to be safe. Um, and they're not dangerous.
Right.
They're
Right.
actually usually really nice.
Yeah. So let me
And
tell you this. Well, actually, let two things. One, first,
okay.
if my coworkers, if they were to listen or even just get wind of this, and I did not clarify, it is you are legally allowed to enter the U.S. and apply for asylum. So, um, there are people who are going around that,
Right,
port of entry
right,
and that
right.
process. But I do want to say that you are allowed in the US to come into the country and claim asylum. That
That's
is
helpful.
that is something that is allowed. So
Yeah. Even
it's
that though, like that's legal.
yes, correct,
Like
correct,
like
correct.
if we're having a conversation around people who are
You may
illegally
still be an asylum seeker and undocumented in the US.
right, right,
Just want
right,
to say that.
right.
Then
Yeah,
I
that's
also want to
helpful. That's
say
a
that
helpful
the
clarification.
US, when we're talking about being one of the third country resettlement countries, something I always used to be able to say that I was really proud about with the US is that the US typically focuses on the most vulnerable, and it's women and children. Women and children and elderly, and medically fragile. That is who we prioritize for resettlement in the US. And so when, there's there's more I can't remember the statistics, but millions of refugees, we can't resettle that number. And so when you start thinking about who and how to decide, one of the metrics that the US has used is most vulnerable.
Right, right.
And so we do get a lot of women and children, single mothers, or and they women who had husbands or spouses, partners, whatever, but maybe they got married in a camp, and so
Hmm,
that
hmm.
their spouse had already applied on as an individual and is not on their case, and or they
It's a
are all
wonky system.
yeah, or they're all together, and the US says, "Well, we can take them." And kind of leave the men behind. And so I think that for people who are afraid, it's important to note that we're not getting a lot of young men or old men. Like we're just, it, not that we aren't, but the US's focus is on gender-based violence, which is primarily women,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and medically fragile because we have so many medical resources, especially in Atlanta with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and,
yeah.
and Emory Healthcare.
Emory.
Yeah, so a lot of people are getting sent, families are getting sent to Atlanta for diagnoses and treatments and things that are gonna make them be able to function in society autonomously where they would have been solely dependent overseas. And so that's who's coming.
Right, right,
And it's
right.
challenging because you get a single mom with like 7 kids and she has to work to pay for, and most of the time it's the older kids are also having to work and it's like
Yeah,
maybe now's not the time to start school if you haven't had a formal education, and
Right.
if you
Right.
have, maybe it was sufficient and now you need to launch, and we'll
Yeah, I need to.
look
Yeah.
for, a GED and, maybe some type of trade program that we can enroll you in. But we just applied for a grant, and I don't know, we'll get it with the Department of Labor to do a female construction entrepreneur program where we can
Hmm.
train women in the field of construction, so that
Wow,
we
interesting.
increase the labor force here in
Yeah.
Atlanta with women who are interested
Hmm.
in doing so. Um,
What percent do you, I don't know if you know this, but like what percent of families do you think that you've taken in or like last year were like single moms, like moms with kids and no dad?
it's hard to say that specifically because
Yeah.
we get a lot of family units, so there might be a grandmother, an aunt, or an
Yes, yes.
uncle. So we don't get a lot of traditional family, it's a
Nuclear
cousin
families.
that's on the case, so it's hard to say, but enough. I mean, it's challenging. Single moms are challenging. A lot of
Yeah.
times we can partner with other agencies to put this is one of my favorite success stories was actually when I was at World Relief, and we had 2 single moms. Well, yes, they both had young children, 2 to 5 years old, who came as a single mom. One from another agency and one through World Relief. We were able to place them together in an apartment, and so one mom would watch both kids while the other
Wow.
worked. They actually were both pregnant. And so they made it work though, right? Like where
Wow.
one went to English classes and she would help the other mom who couldn't go to class and she was working, and then they would flip their work schedule and their caretaking. And I'm telling you what, I thought that they were never going to make it. Like I was just like, this is one of the most challenging cases. And we found volunteers to come alongside them to help them with their rent for a few more months.
Mm,
And they're both doing great. I'm friends with one of them now. Like, she was able to bring
yeah.
her husband, it was, like, 6 years later, and
Wow.
he came. I took her to the airport to pick him up, was part of that reunion. She owns her own car, drives a car, works, speaks English. The other mom is integrated into her community, has 2 kids, is doing well, and I'm telling you, for the first, like, 6 to 8 months, I was like, I just felt like they were always on the
Oh,
brink
is
of
this gonna
homelessness.
happen?
I just
Yeah.
was like, I
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
like, how long do we help them? Like,
Right. Right.
and you talked, in our introduction about, upwardly mobile and empowering people and helping them up, right? Not just
Yeah.
helping in a way that perpetuates them in their
Mm,
situation. And that's something Inspiritus is really focused on, is empowerment, not enabling. And so that's in everything we do. We're like, do with, not for. Do with, not for. So you're teaching them how to do it when you're not there. And it's challenging for volunteers because we need to be needed, or we want to be needed,
yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's hard
Our
to.
own ego wants to
Yes,
do
wants them to
for.
call us, want them to need to call us, not work it where they don't need us.
Yes.
But I always tell volunteers that, like, your end goal should be friendship, where you are
Yeah.
friends with these people, this family or whatever, in a way that you just live life together, not that they need you to live their life.
Yeah. That's good. Sarah, where do you think this is all headed? Like big picture policy wise, or for Inspiritus, and like kind of what conversations are y'all having as a team of like what the next couple years might look
Yeah.
like?
I mean, okay. I mean, we talk about it on a regular basis. I'm part of a lot of strategic planning meetings, and some of it's like feels very futile because things just change constantly. So it's like
Yeah.
we can strategically plan for the next few weeks, and then we need a new plan. But I will say the things that we are doing, and it is important for me to say, and Spiritus is still here. We're still open. We're still working, and so even though we're not resettling refugees in every office, we we had other programs. We had other programs that we've been able to support families who are already here. And so one of those main programs is economic empowerment. And I think the economic side of you is probably interested in that, but we're helping with savings match programs. We're helping with, like translation of their degrees so that we can try to get them into, similar fields here where,
Nice.
we're helping people, I mean, with jobs for sure, getting jobs, getting bank accounts, budgeting, things like that. So we're doing a lot of, you know, money management courses,
Yeah.
um,
Financial literacy.
financial literacy, small business loans. We actually have a
Yeah.
program now we're able to help with entrepreneurs who are wanting to start their own businesses and getting business
Cool.
coaching. So we're partnering business coaches with clients who are interested in starting their own business.
And these are refugees that
Mhm.
you're helping or kind of,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Then, okay.
So that's really a a lot of the direction we're looking to go is how do we help people who have been here. Some people, the learning curve is more severe, and
Yep.
maybe they were starting with not having running water or electricity. That's a lot to learn in a short amount of time. And so we may be coming alongside those families to help them, continue their learning process, or families that have, one of the programs that has been reinstated is intensive case management, and it allows us to come alongside a family for or client for a year and help them, one of the, like, qualifications for them to be in the program is some type of medical need. So they got a referral to a doctor, but now they need to go and they need to have testing, and then they need to get maybe a therapy over here or a surgery and then follow up with the therapy. That's a lot for a person to navigate. So they can have a case manager walk with them for a year.
The folks
And
who came in last year
yes, are
would
eligible to be
qualify.
enrolled in this program. Yeah, exactly. And so they have certain goals, for self-sufficiency, and so you're working towards those goals within that year, being able to make the appointment on their own, being able to call Medicaid transportation or Uber or whatever to get there on their own. Learning how to take their medication, what comes, what's in the morning and what's at night, how to get a refill at the pharmacy. All of those are things that, like, a case manager will be helping them with. We're still able to do that. We're applying for additional loans and grants. I haven't even mentioned our after school program. So we have a, after school program in Savannah and, Clarkston at Clarkston High School, and it's kids of refugee families, who are coming and who are learning. It's a trauma informed care, so they're learning anger
Yeah.
management skills,
Yeah.
conflict resolution, how to not allow, but so much of their trauma dictates how they respond to
Mm.
failing a test or breaking up with a boyfriend, and so it's getting in there and playing soccer, doing art therapy, helping with homework, and then talking through, some relationship skills.
Feelings.
Yeah, conflict management. And then in Birmingham, we don't have an after school, but we have volunteers who are paired with kids that age. And I think the same in Nashville. So we're looking, and there are grants that we're applying for youth and for youth services, and so we're thinking, how can we impact that next generation, of they're not first gen, they came as refugees as children, but they're the first in their families to be raised in America, and so that's very different. They don't have a lot of times don't have a mentor to ask. So that's what we're looking at doing, is just
Yeah.
shifting and leaning into the work that we have been doing, but expanding it.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're a Christian philanthropist, maybe you have a foundation or some donor advised fund assets, you have a heart for refugees, check out Inspiritus. They are doing great work. I'm sure Sarah will not mind if you shoot her an email if you're interested in giving them a grant or want to learn more about
Would love that.
some projects and programs that they're operating. So definitely reach out to Sarah, check out Inspiritus. And Sarah, I have a last question for you today. You mentioned you spoke at churches a lot this
Yeah.
year and,
Yeah.
and kind of made the rounds there. I'm curious about um, how followers of Jesus can love refugees like Jesus, and like how you kind of see like the person of Jesus
Yeah.
being one who can provide refuge, so to speak.
Yeah. I think it's welcoming the stranger, it's just being kind and welcoming to the people around you that, you know, don't look like you. That don't look like they came to America. So for me, like I said, that relationship with the Burmese family made me kinder in the grocery store. It made me kinder in the parking lot. on, in traffic, in Atlanta traffic, just made me more understanding of people around me may not be coming from the same foundation that I came from. And so I think it starts there with just being kinder to the people around you that
Yeah.
probably had a different start in life than you did. And then beyond that, volunteer.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Spiritus or with
Roll up
any
your sleeves.
right, with any organization in your community that are serving, specifically for me, refugees and immigrants is what I would compel you to volunteer. And if, like thinking about Durham, we don't have an office in Durham. I actually had someone yesterday call me about, if we had a Lutheran services in North Carolina. And we don't. So, in that way, I'm like, you can give, right? Like you mentioned already. So I think they have time or money. And so, whatever you have, share it. And if that's your time, then we need it. We need people who have the time to give to others. And if you have no time, but you have extra money, we need that as well. And, you know, so much of right now, w- we're trying to focus on making sure our clients get to that self-sufficiency. That's our number one goal. So we did a huge, huge campaign to raise money for rent in February, March. But you know what? We were like, I think we can get people jobs by April. So like, we don't need to raise money for April. I don't think. Maybe for a few people who had like extenuating circumstances, some single moms or some help. But what I love about Unspiritus is we're not raising money for things we don't need. So, what we're looking at ahead is food insecurity. A lot of our
Mm.
families do rely on food stamps.
Food
They're
stamps.
working, but they're not. Food stamps is a part of their budget, right? For
Right.
their large families. And so if that's cut in the next year, one of the big things we're going to be raising money for is specifically for groceries. And
Hmm.
gift cards for groceries are great and fine. It's a little challenging because sometimes families can't walk to the grocery store of the gift card. So sometimes our staff are then using the gift card, buying groceries and delivering them. And that's a little bit more time and labor, but we'll do it. We'll do it for families that, we're concerned about and need. And we're looking at our local food banks have lost funding as well. So whereas we might have redirected them to a local food bank, we're not sure that it's going to have the capacity. So just looking at, the coming year, if we're talking about what we're afraid of, what we're planning for, that's one of our biggest fears is food insecurity. And
Yeah.
our national
Yeah.
program is planting gardens. They're saying, how can we help you you literally raise some of your own food? Uh,
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Lots of good work that you're still doing. So Sarah, thank you so much for all the work that you are doing, and for connecting with folks like me and local churches and community groups, and sharing about the work. I feel like what's coming to mind is a verse in scripture that says, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing some have entertained angels unaware. And I think that verse is kind of bonkers. Like, I think it's just really fun, but is also a challenge for us of like, what is our posture towards strangers, and do we see them as people with dignity and worth, made in the image of God, people to be loved and welcomed. And we can't love people and be afraid of them at the same time, frankly. So may we grow in love then, and not fear. But anyways, Sarah, thank you for your time. This is super fun. And I hope you have blessings just on your work moving forward.
appreciate it, Brian.
The invitation to grow this week is to reach out to someone in your community who has a different background from you and ask them to get coffee or a meal to learn more about their experiences and culture. Thank you to Sarah Burke for sharing your wisdom on this episode. You can learn more about Inspiritus at weinspirit.org. That's weinspirit.org. If you have feedback on this episode, you can reach me at brian@simplecharity.org. On the next show, I speak with the CEO of the National Immigration Forum about the current politics of refugee resettlement under the Trump administration and how our faith in Jesus informs our views on refugee policy. I hope you join me as we continue to learn to love generously like Jesus. Have a great rest of your week. See you next time.